Hello and good morning, everyone. I believe that the technical glitches have now been solved. Thank you so much to Real ID for providing us with the technical support and advantages of having this Zoom. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, as the case may be in certain parts. My name is Jorge Duran, and I am the Chief of the Secretariat for the Inter-American Committee of Ports of the Organization of American States. Welcome to today's webinar on how to develop and implement a port community system. I know that this is a very interesting and a topic to all of us because, of course, it is part of the digitalization of port operations and port functions, along with several new ideas and technologies and the redesign of the same processes to convey information, and it carries with it a lot of planning, a lot of investment in both hard and soft technology or infrastructure, as well as connecting with many actors of the supply chain to get a more efficient system running, to save in time and in cost, and to produce economies of scale, and of course to avoid duplication of efforts, and to like I said, provide a more efficient sort of link in the supply chain. And this, of course, is an effort that every port is undertaking, whether in the English-speaking Caribbean, in Latin America, or in Europe or Southeast Asia. Ports of today are somehow using technology, integrating technology into their operations to become more competitive, to become more environmentally sustainable, to become more socially inclusive, to become, in this case, more digitized. So welcome again. As you know, the Inter-American Committee of Ports, the CIP, works on 6 priorities. This digitization, innovation, logistics being one of them. And I want to thank and recognize my companions today, starting with Mr. Hans Broek. Hans, as you know, is the chairman of our partner, our strategic ally, the International Port Community Systems Association. And Hans is here with us, part of this opening remarks, where was supposed to be Mr. Richard Morton, Secretary General for the IPCSA. Unfortunately, Richard has taken and disposed this afternoon, and therefore I'm going to ask my good friend Hans to take the floor for the opening remarks. Hans, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Thank you so much for the introduction given, and welcome to everybody on behalf of course, the Inter-American Committee of Ports and ourselves, the International Port Community System Association, especially from Richard Morton, which you know, which is our Secretary General, who could not join us today, unfortunately, and myself, Hans Broek, being Chairman of IPCSA, and all our members. I'm very happy to be together again, and I hope within soon that we can meet in person. But nowadays we have to cope with the facts that are still going around, and doing this kind of webinars is also a very good opportunity to let you know some ins and outs about a number of aspects that you have to take care when you look at the PCS developments. Today, already used the words PCS developments. It's about developments of PCSs. You see around the world already many PCSs are available in ports, and in those ports, in those areas, port areas, you will find out that there's a lot of let's say boosting in the logistics, in a way of less of dwell time, better handling of the containers or cargo, etc., etc. COVID-19 has opened and awakened a number of countries and ports that it is out of the question these days to use paper documents anymore. Paper documents which are lasting already for many, many years, we have to go for digitalization. And digitalization is key. And when we look at digitalization, from our perspective, we look at the port and port areas, that it is about port community systems and single windows. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this slide, just for an hour, that we are together, and the presentations from my friends from Barbados Port and Nikkei from Jamaica and myself will give some highlights on the port developments, what is necessary to have the port developments, and what is going on in the ports they are working on. So I wish you a very pleasant stay the coming time. Hopefully you have a lot of Q&As after our sessions. And I see you back in a few seconds.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Hans, for your welcoming words. And again, our best wishes for a quick and speedy recovery for Richard. Indeed, we're going to have 3 presenters today in a different format. The presentations will be concise, will be focused, because they're only 15 minutes long. After each speaker does their bit, we will now move to a discussion session that will be, this whole thing will be guided by Mona Swoboda from the Secretariat, and you know, my number one, as I like to call her. So I'll give her the floor to just take the event. But I did want to bring your attention to the fact that we're going to have very interesting perspectives today, very useful and insightful presentations, I think. First, the perspective from Hans, from the association, correct? An international perspective that he has on how, like he said, no papers anymore. Trade facilitation agreement requires a paperless transaction. So we'll have that view, and then we'll have 2 other perspectives. One from Jamaica, who has a working PCS, and we will get that experience and how they started it and how, what challenges they faced. And then we'll have the perspective of Barbados Port. Now, Barbados is currently with us, with the CIP, developing a project to establish a PCS. So I believe these are 3 different yet very useful perspectives for all of us to learn more on the subject. And that said, I want to turn it over to Mona Swoboda from the Secretariat to please take the floor and take care of the webinar. Indeed, we will all see each other again at the end in the question and answer session. I can't guarantee it that we will ask your question, but if you have a question, please write it on the chat. And if there's time and it's appropriate, we will do our best to ask your question from one of the speakers. Please be specific as which speaker you would like to ask the question to. And with that said, thank you very much. Without further ado, Mona, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Very well said. Thank you, Hans and Jorge, again, for your very warm welcome. My name is Mona Swoboda. I am Program Manager at the OAS Inter-American Committee on Ports, also known as CIP or SIP. And I'm very excited to moderate today's webinar on how to develop a port community system. Welcome also to all our participants. I think we're around 80 participants so far, so welcome to all of you. I see many familiar names and also many new names, so again, welcome everyone. As you know, and as Hans and Jorge mentioned, the webinar today will address key aspects of successful PCS implementation projects. And our friend Hans from IPCSA, Romel from Barbados Port Inc., and Nikkei from the Port Authority of Jamaica, they will share insights and offer also some recommendations on how to effectively implement a reliable, secure, and sustainable port community system. And as Jorge mentioned, the presentations will be followed by a roundtable discussion that will focus on how to overcome implementation challenges. And it will also, we'll try to provide some successful solutions and strategic actions for PCS development and implementation. And like Jorge said, here we invite you to post your questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll get to them. So please feel free to ask away. Also, please note that the webinar recording and the presentations will become available on the SIP website, portalsip.org. I believe Jorge has already posted it in the chat. Yeah, and without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist, who truly doesn't need an introduction, but I will introduce him briefly anyway. Hans Rook is the chairman at IPCSA since being appointed in 2017. Hans dedicates his extensive career in the port and maritime industries to boosting process flows in the transport and logistics sectors as they relate to shipping. And in his most recent role as senior advisor at Portbase, Hans led strategy and business process implementation related to PCS usage. As IPCSA chairman, he is responsible for leading the board, focusing it on strategic matters and fostering its effectiveness. And he is, of course, doing an outstanding job. We are so excited to have you, Hans, and very much looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mona, for your introduction given. I will now share my screen and just let me know whether you see what I see. I see the start of the presentation. Do you see the same?
So do we, yes.
Right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Here where I am for the second time. You have seen Jorge 2 times already, so now it's my time again. I hope that that my introduction on the how to develop a PCS gives you some insight on the aspects you have to look at. When I talk about how to develop a PCS, I can talk for hours. I can give you more insight than only in a quarter of an hour, to tell you honestly, because it's not rocket science. It's not something that you can do just with a click of your fingers. It needs time. It needs fundamental things to be developed, and that is essential. I'm sure that especially my colleague from Jamaica will some have statements which you will find in my presentation as well. And then you will note that it's so important that there is an equal knowledge and a common knowledge between the various parties on certain aspects of the development of a PCS. Well, just to start with the definition, to create a common understanding, what is a PCS? To start a PCS development, it is critical to have a good understanding and agreed on a PCS and what it can do for your local region. So we have defined the following statement of what is a PCS. Neutral. Especially neutral is very important to note. And open electronic platform enabling intelligent and secure exchange of information between the between the public and private stakeholders in order to improve the competitive position of the sea and airports community. So not only seaports, but also airports are involved. It optimizes and manages and automates ports and logistics efficient processes through a single submission of data and connected transport and logistics chains. And there in bold, a trusted third party. So neutral and trusted. And the words will come back through the presentation because that's so important for the stakeholders that you are a neutral party and that you are trusted by them. So why a port community system? Well, actually, the reason basically is to reduce inefficiencies in the port process, in the business processes, to facilitate, the smooth flow of electronic data as much as possible. So no paperwork anymore. Digitalization is the key these days. Integrate and achieve compliance with national and international law and regulations. Don't forget that when you have to let's say, exchange data with the government, you have to look at the law and regulations. Enhancing the logistic processes through the improved data exchange and data sharing will mean fewer delays in cargo movements. And just to give you an example, when you look at the Western Africa coast, we knew it was months. It's now reduced to weeks, so they're very happy. In other regions, we see weeks reduced to days. In other regions, days to hours and hours to minutes, even in the most advanced ports. So that's resulting in a better performance in the ports, and resulting in a better performance means it's resulting in a reduce of costs. COVID-19 is a booster. I already mentioned it in my the highlight in the beginning, what COVID-19 has meant in the mindset of people. There is these days a less resistance to change to new methods, to new methods of working. Digitalization initiatives and projects has now become the highest priority. We are so much, the ring the bell to us by many countries, by many ports, if we can help them, if we can assist them for the fundamental things of for PCS development. And we say, yes, we are there. We are there for them. And I'm very happy that today as well, Jamaica and Barbados are online. And Barbados is one of our latest members within IPCSA, and we celebrated that just 1 month ago. So I'm still looking for Jamaica to have them as a member as well. We have been in contact for many, many times already. Port community systems and single windows are critical for trade continuity and provided the resilience to carry on the trading. So important factors, and especially COVID-19 has been boosted really. Who takes the initiative? Who is the owner? Who will be the operator of the system? Well, globally seen, in most cases, the port authority takes the lead. They see that the competitive edge of ports in the region is very important, and that they need to have digitalization. They need to have, let's say, the logistics as a part of their infrastructure. It's their aim even to have the best utilization of the port infrastructure in this case. So a port community system is seen as a critical factor to reach that goal. Although in most cases it's their initiative, still decisions has to be taken to who will be the shareholder. Will it be a separate department within the company or the port authority? Or will it be a separate public, either private entity? Or will the scope be a business model based on non-profit or profit center? So a lot of questions to be asked. We asked to the people where we talk to have a view on what are you aiming for? What are your goals? And how do you want to reach the goals? So it's important to make that decision before any next step in development. How and where to start a PCS development? Well, here see, and my colleague Javier Gallardo is not online, but he's here as well in Riga. A port community system is not an IT project, but a change management project. Change management is key, and I cannot emphasize this not too much, that change management, people business is key. Involvement of the community from the start is really essential success for the PCS that fulfills requirements. Have them in. Tell what you're going to do and do what you say. So tell us, say what you do and do what you say. The community includes all stakeholders, business and government agencies that have an interest. So it's big, actually. And I always say, have a view on the horizon. Think big, but act small. Otherwise, you will never come to terms and never make the first step. Actually, all parties, really all parties involved in the logistic chain in and around the port are involved, either active or just view or use the data for their purposes. Stakeholder management. Most important part of the PCS development is the human factor. Support and commitment from the stakeholders is really, really essential. If the stakeholders say no, if the stakeholders are reluctant to change, you can have a nice system. You can have an IT system that runs, but it will not be used. And when it's not used, you don't get your goals done. So without this, it's really useless to start any development. Transparency about the intended development, as people will be reluctant to accept. It's people business, so tell them, be transparent to them. Good, timely, and open communication is really essential. What I already said in the former slide, say what you do and do what you say. Essential aspects, neutrality and trust, there they are again. Emphasize that the PCS is meant to fine-tune and enhance the port processes. And it is not meant to interfere in the business competition. Very essential. Actually, it's a process that you already do. You do by paper exchange to many of your parties, bilateral communication. But now you do it in a structured way. And exchanging the data you do already by using the papers is not your business competition. Your business competition is on sales, on being the best. And that's still your opportunity to be taken care of. And it's not a part of a PCS development. So data sharing is key for better performance and data quality. And one source of information, so the same information is there available for all the stakeholders. So if data is wrong, it's wrong for everybody. If data is right, it's right for everybody. Involvement of the community, just a slide with some steps where you have to take care of. So really, one of the most important factors to assist stakeholders in their change is closely involve them in development. Really closely involve them. Take them by hand and take them along and tell and sit together. Try to imagine the way they think. Actually, when you are looking to stakeholders or to, let's say, the people on the floor that have to do the work, they do not know anything about what the change will bring. So it's completely new for them. They might have nightmares even, right? So in context, do not only send information like I do today, but that's the way we have to act together, but listen to the stakeholders. And actually, I always say 30% of the communication comes from the consultant, from me, and 70% of the communication comes from you as stakeholders. You know the business, you know the processes, you know your pain points, and you know what you're aiming for. So that's the way to look at it. Change management aspects, just a few again. There it is again. Trust is key. Trust and neutrality are the basis for a good development of PCS. Change from lateral communication to share of information. Bear that in mind. From verbal communication, have a phone call left, phone call right, etc., etc. The uses of notepads, smartphones, EDI, and machine-to-machine communication are essential. Physical distribution of documents, no way. It's all about data, electronic data exchange. And also that, I can imagine that you have now something in hands, a piece of paper, send it to somebody else or show it to somebody else. And now it's somewhere in the air, in the clouds, or on the machine. It's electronic. You don't have the piece of paper anymore. That's a different mindset. You get used to it, but it takes time. From physical transport and visits to the various offices to more inside office-related work. That's a new change for people. And you can add a lot of value to yourself and your business partners in helping each other to make the use of the PCS service as transparent as possible to the end users. Very important aspects to bear in mind. On the left, when I give masterclasses in the Netherlands or wherever, I always say, I don't want to hear this phrase. We have always done it this way. And sometimes you look at people and say, yeah, I know what you want to say, but don't tell me we have done it always this way. We know. So that's the old way, but a new way is always keep a window open in your mind for new ideas. To end with, you see a picture on the right. I have to change to stay the same. And I translate it in you have to change to stay the same. It's on a wall in the high school in the Netherlands, where I walked by when I was working for Portbase at the time. And it has always been in my mind, and I use it every time again. And actually, when you look at to change to stay the same, you did it already. Look at the use of your smartphones and notepads these days. I'm sure 99% of the audience, maybe even 100% of the audience, uses the devices. So you did change because they were not there before the 2000s. So you did change, but you're still the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hans, for a wonderful presentation. I think you very beautifully set the stage for our webinar today and the following discussion. And I liked it very much how you highlighted the quote of your colleague that a PCS is more than an IT project. It is a change management project. And I would love to talk about that a little bit more with you later on in our Q&A session. So thank you very much, Hans, for setting the stage so perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I am now excited to introduce my good friend and colleague at BPI, Barbados Port Inc., Mr. Rommel Edwards. He has been a member of the BPI team for 23 years. He began his role there as a software developer and is credited with developing the first Windows-based application and subsequently the first tablet-based application used at BPI. Since then, he has designed and developed over 40 software initiatives aimed at simplifying port processes and ultimately enhancing trade facilitation. During his tenure as assistant manager of management information systems, he was instrumental in the success of two major projects, one being the integration of Asakuta World with BPI systems and the transition of BPI's cargo management from an on-premises system to Octopi, Barbados Port Inc.'s first cloud-based terminal operating system. In 2020, the Digital Innovation and Development Department was formed, and Romel was chosen as the manager. That's the role he's in today. And the department is responsible for the development, deployment, and maintenance of the Barbados Port Community System. Romel is a certified port executive and certified NIST cybersecurity lead implementer, and he leads the Barbados Port Community System technical and cybersecurity committees and represents BPI on the Barbados Electronic Single Window Steering Committee. And as Jorge mentioned earlier, here at the CIP, we are currently assisting BPI in implementing their PCS. I've had the pleasure of working closely with Romel, and he's awesome. So very much looking forward to his presentation. Romel, over to you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. You're seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Well, let's jump right into it. Thanks, Hans, for your presentation as well. You introduced the what, so we all are now familiar with what is a PCS, and we are also familiar with why we should have a PCS. So I'll take this opportunity to just introduce Barbados Port Inc. We are the entity that manages the Port of Bridgetown. We are a multi-purpose port, so we handle freight of all kinds. We handle over 1.1 million tons a year, as well as over 1,000 vessel calls annually. Our vision is to be the most innovative green maritime hub in the world by 2030. So it's ambitious, but we are going to do it. We would have built the Caribbean's first homegrown maritime single window. And as Mona just said, we are currently implementing our port community system. So, first of all, we need stakeholder engagement. This is a cornerstone in your PCS journey. Your implementation simply will not proceed if you do not have this stakeholder engagement. You need to also identify your stakeholders. So you need to know who are your major stakeholders, who are your minor stakeholders, but we need to know all of them. And for PCS, one major stakeholder, which I think will be the same across the board, would be customs. Given the nature of the job of port officials and people in the maritime industry, we would agree that nothing can happen without customs. So customs will be a major stakeholder. We also need to know the role that each stakeholder plays. And this is where you will form your stakeholder matrix. What's in it for the stakeholders? Well, the benefits for them, it must outweigh the financial and our resource costs. So we're talking about reduced customer turnaround times. We're talking about reduced or eliminated paperwork. We're talking about savings in operational costs. You need to also form a PCS steering committee. And this steering committee would agree on the direction and the operation of the PCS. As Hans would have mentioned earlier, there needs to be a common understanding amongst the steering committee members. We need to all agree on what the PCS aims to achieve, and we need to all manage each stakeholder's expectations. We would also stress that there's active representation of each stakeholder on the committee. Every stakeholder must have a voice, and that voice matters. So that is extremely important. And we also need the commitment by each stakeholder to honor and execute whatever action items comes out of meetings, because we can plan, but we must execute. We also stress on capability assessment, and this was part of our exercise in our initial PCS journey. So we have looked at legislation. Is there any supporting legislation? Are there any regulations or policies that we must look? Does this legislation, is this enough? Does it require a review? Are there any variances between legislations? So for instance, you may have a variance in deadlines between what customs expects and what immigration expects, for instance. You may also have variances in where one entity may consider a certain set of data to be mandatory, whereas it is optional for another entity. So all of these are gaps that you should address. You also need to look to see if these stakeholders are technologically up to date. So do they have the tools needed to carry out the intended functions of the PCS? You also have to look at your infrastructure. So are there any connectivity issues? Are there issues with their network? internet issues, bandwidth issues. So these are things that you look at as well. And then we cannot overlook funding. So do these stakeholders have access to funding? Because the PCS will be an exercise in cost. You need to form your strategic partnerships. This is extremely important. No man is an island. No country is an island, well, figuratively. So the PCS in itself, it is an expensive venture. It is not going to be cheap. So you need to form these partnerships, seek affordable funding. You should also hire neutral and external expertise. So here at BPIE, we are under the keen eye of the OAS, as Mona would have mentioned earlier. So we have taken on the services of the OAS CIP, and they have brought this neutral and expert eye. You need to develop a business model. This model should at least speak to governance, it will speak to operations, it will speak to cost recovery, it will speak to additional revenue streams. You should also gain as much knowledge beforehand by aligning with like-minded people. So as was mentioned earlier, Barbados actually joined the International PCS Association, and that was celebrated about a month ago or so. We would also recommend that you do not start from scratch. There are people out there who have done this before, so align yourself with other ports. We had the opportunity to tour. We were in Rotterdam, so we actually met with Hans in person. That was the thing. So the sign that Hans showed on his last slide, we all saw that sign in person, and it's a very profound statement. We also went over to Felixstowe in England, and then we visited our friends there at the Port Authority in Jamaica and at Kingston Wharves as well. So visit other ports, collaborate with other ports, and see how they have gone about doing their own PCSs. We have to take a look at business process reengineering. So there are a lot of things that you would have been accustomed doing it before. And as Hans would say, there are people that would say, well, we've always done it this way. That does not mean that the way you've always done it is still the most efficient way. So there are going to be some paradigm shifts, and one of them is in the way in which you go about doing your processes. Some of these processes would have come about because of limitations in the technology at the time, limitations in the legislation at the time. Some of these processes are duplicitous, so you'll find that you are doing the same thing at different agencies. So we're going to have this paradigm shift where we revisit these processes and we engage in a process called prudent pruning. And this is where we not only re-engineer processes, but there are some aspects that may need to be cut altogether that are no longer useful. So we engage in this prudent pruning and we come up with a much leaner model. There's also a paradigm shift as it relates to teamwork. So it's not just that you are a customs officer working for customs, or you're an immigration officer working for immigration, or port health officer working for Ministry of Health. You are now part of a greater team, of a PCS team. So it is now at a country level, you're now part of a national initiative. So that is another paradigm shift that you will have to think. Your documentation as well, that is also subject to review. Do you really need all that you ask for? There are some aspects of documentation. So for instance, in our journey with the Maritime Single Window, we would have reviewed several of the documents that are required for vessel reporting. And it was immediately obvious that many of these documents were repetitive. They asked for the same information, vessel names, vessel characteristics, and much of this information does not change. So once you have submitted it, it is unlikely that it will change ever again. So revisit your documentation. Do you need to ask for all of this information? You also need to revisit your touch points, because as a customer, if you are transacting business with a port in the port community, you want to do as much as your business at as little stations as possible. So for instance, here at BPI, we have a situation here where you would make a payment at a port cashier, and then you still make a payment at a customs cashier. So what if we could make all of the payments at one cashier? And that's just one example of reducing your touch points. I cannot speak enough about technology. So yes, a PCS is all about change management, but no, it will not happen without technology. So technology plays a very critical role, and there's several aspects of technology to choose from out there. One thing we should do is form a technical steering committee. And this committee is formed to address any concerns, any issues, and to lead the direction of the internal development. We would advise to use cloud technology where feasible. There are several documented advantages to cloud technology. BPI uses, for the first time, we have started using a cloud-based terminal operating system. And this has brought about tremendous benefits. So we would advise to use cloud technology where possible. Our friends over in Felix Tool, they have an on-premise system, but their on-premise system is really a private cloud. So it is pretty much the same thing. It is a distributed data center they have over there, but we would still advise to use the cloud technology. We should also use technology that eases the workload. So as I say in several other forums, you should not go from using a lot of paper to doing a lot of typing. There's a lot of technology out there, such as machine learning. There's technology where we can leverage the use of Internet of Things. So there's a lot of technology out there, so that makes your workload easier. You should also think past the conventional devices. So it's no longer about computers or laptops. It's no longer about mobile phones and tablets. There's several other smart devices out there that can aid in your journey along the PCS. Your PCS will eventually become a huge data store. So then you have to think about things like big data. You have to think about data lakes, data warehousing. You have to use analytics to determine trends, to make business decisions, to make predictions. So all of these are benefits to leveraging the right technology. During our PCS tour earlier this year, we would have heard about, languages that were chosen. Some people opted for Java. There were different languages. My advice from our journey is that there are several languages out there. Some are very mature, some are new, but they pack quite a punch, and leverage the best of each world. So we actually use a mix of languages here at BPI. We use JavaScript, we use C# and .NET framework, but on the mobile side, we use technologies such as Xamarin and Google's Flutter, which are newcomers to the game, but they already have a proven track record. And then we also use what we call DevOps, which is a lot of continuous integration or continuous deployment, and a whole cycle of testing, version control, so you make sure that everyone is pretty much on the same page, so to speak. There are also cybersecurity considerations. No system, especially PCS, should be built without security being part of design. Security should never be an afterthought. So just as a PCS steering committee is formed, you should also form a cybersecurity steering committee. You conduct your regular cybersecurity risk assessments. You raise cyber awareness. You employ existing frameworks. So Mona would have mentioned earlier, it's not only myself, but we have other staff members who are also certified National Institute of Science and Technology cybersecurity lead implementers. And that was quite an in-depth course, and it's only the first chapter. But cybersecurity is not to be taken for granted. You use existing policies. So there's something called the Open Web Application Security Project. You follow those guidelines. It is a tried and true, tested, we call it a cookbook. So you follow those policies. And having done all this, your first iteration of your PCS should look something like this. You have all of your major components. So you have your cargo tracking, your online payments, you handle your electronic manifests. Your benefits should be, first and foremost, full visibility. So no black holes, so to speak. You must always be able to see where your cargo is. You must always be able to facilitate online payments. And given the advent of COVID, there's this shift from the physical into the virtual. So all of these things need to be accessible online. In terms of marine data, marine traffic, you should have a component that manages that as well. Here at BPI, we have a separate maritime single window, which manages the marine component, and it will interface with our upcoming PCS. I cannot stress enough about dashboards. Dashboards, real-time reporting, it is extremely important. It will give your upper management key insights, almost instantaneous insights, and they will be happy. Once they're happy, you will be happy. There's also the reduction in operational costs. One of the aims of the PCS is to reduce your operational costs. So you want to have this as a benefit. There's the intelligent data sharing. So once one entity has the data, it is disseminated, and the part of that data that is pertaining to the other entities is disseminated. So you don't disseminate all of the data to everyone. You do it intelligently. You disseminate that which concerns customs to customs, that which concerns the port to port, and vice versa. And one of the things you will want to do is to reduce your documentation to a single point of submission. So a single source of truth, as we like to call it here at Barbados. And folks, that brings me to the end of my presentation. My information's there on the slide, should you need to contact me further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ramel. Thank you, my friend, for this, as I thought, very actionable presentation. You really highlighted some of the key steps that you at BPI have taken as you are continuing your journey of implementing the Barbados Port Community System. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing a little bit more from you in our Q&A, and also hearing a little bit more about that time you had with Hans in Rotterdam. So that was very intriguing. So maybe we'll get to chat about that as well.
Actually, yes, when he showed that slide, I was like, wow, yes, that was a nice reminder.
No, but all jokes aside, I'm looking forward to speaking a little bit more in depth with you later on in our Q&A. And I would like to take this opportunity to remind our participants, our audience, that if you have any questions for Ramel, Hans, and our next speaker, Nikane, to ask away, and we'll make sure to get to those hopefully later on in the Q&A. Thank you again so much, Ramel.
Thank you.
Now I am delighted to introduce our next speaker, Nikane Peck, from the Port Authority of Jamaica. He has over a decade of experience in the shipping and logistics industry, and has worked in varying technical and management roles. He has worked with both the Port Authority of Jamaica and Kingston Freeport Terminal Limited, formerly KCT Services Limited. Nikane is currently employed to the Port Authority of Jamaica in the capacity of Operations Manager for the Jamaican Port Community System Operator. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Enterprise Computing and Information Technology from the University of Technology, Jamaica. And we're just really thrilled to have Nikane with us today. So without further ado, I will just pass it on over to him. Nikane, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen.
Yes, I'll confirm once we see the presentation. We see it. Awesome.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, fellow panelists, webinar attendees, good day. My presentation will be on how to develop a PCS, and I'll be highlighting what we saw in Jamaica as critical factors, and from our experience in implementing the Jamaican PCS. Now, in starting the implementation, we start off with the definition of a PCS. And as my colleague Hans showed the official definition, the PCS system is a neutral and open, The Port Community System is a neutral and open electronic platform enabling intelligent and secure exchange of information between public and private stakeholders in order to improve the competitive position of the sea and airport communities. It optimizes, manages, and automates port and logistics processes through a single submission of data connecting transport and logistic chains. Right. After deciding that your country wants to implement a port community system, the next natural thing to ask is, where do I start. You start by having your analysis done of your current trade environment and determine the best methodologies and strategies to be employed in your development of your PCS. You should also identify the resources that you have available in order to carry out the execution of the development and implementation. And knowing that you do not know early is actually a plus. This is where you would get help. You'd seek to get knowledge from countries who have been down the road, and basically in an aim to understand and assist in guiding you on how to go about your implementation. Bear in mind that no two implementation of a PCS is identical, and also that every country has its strategic goals, economic landscape, business political nuances, business processes, culture, etc. Right? These are the things that would eventually determine the scope of the PCS that will be implemented in your country, and in addressing the question of what would be solved by the implementation of a PCS in your country. Now, what happened in the Jamaica's implementation? We recognized earlier that we did not have the capacity to acquire and implement the PCS by ourselves. So a tender process was engaged for PCS consultants to acquire the resources to assist the Port Authority of Jamaica in its mandate. PCS consultant would support the analysis of the following high-level areas: the RFP creation, legal analysis, port processes, commercial viability, technological implications, and the commercial model. From our implementation, we have identified a few critical areas which we class as pillars of implementation. We start with legislation. Having the laws in place to support the creation, legitimacy, and operations of a PCS is critical. In Jamaica, the government, through a cabinet decision, decided to implement the PCS with the Port Authority of Jamaica as the lead entity. Amendments were made to the Port Authority and port management and security regulations to facilitate the establishment and the implementation of the PCS. Another key pillar is communication and collaboration. Getting stakeholder buy-in to the vision and committing to the implementation is critical. You need to obtain strategic partnerships. Some of these, as alluded to by my fellow panelists, were customs, which is a major key player in the industry, and also like the shipping association of your country. Also very important, you need to implement a steering committee, and the steering committee should comprise of public, private, C-level stakeholder entity members to oversee and direct the project. This will be instrumental in making decisions quickly and moving from concept to rollout with authority. Communication channels should also be created and maintained with all the stakeholders, keeping them aware of the plans, the execution, and the impact of project modules and milestones. The next pillar is business process reengineering. Now, this is a big one. Right? This is where the review of the industry-wide processes are done to optimize and gain efficiencies. Coming out of this process, there will be newly created processes. There will be old processes which will be discarded, updated processes, and some processes will be retained and optimized. Business process reengineering is a constant process and evolves as new processes emerge based on the changes in the industry. A review of implemented processes need to be carried out to determine if they are working as expected. This is after the process has been implemented, or if modifications are needed. You also need to remember that not all the processes will be incorporated at the onset. A next major pillar is technology. Selecting robust systems to implement the PCS platform is critical. This gives the PCS a backbone in which to operate. There's also a critical need to set up interoperability channels with built-in redundancies with your core stakeholder systems. This would be like your customs or your terminals or warehouses, etc., where the information would be exchanged between the PCS and these entities. Right? This will enable the community systems to talk to each other in real time and provide information to the relevant stakeholder at the relevant time. Another consideration should be if a system failure should occur, and mitigation strategies should be employed here to lessen the likelihood of this happening. But based on experience with IT systems, something will fail at some point in time, and you just need to be prepared for that failure and have proper mitigation strategies and implement a proper disaster recovery plan. A next pillar is having to decide on the business model that you would employ. A business model needs to be determined on how the implementation will be viable and sustained. In Jamaica's implementation, we employed like a revenue neutral model, essentially meaning that the focus is on financing and running of the PCS and its processes, and that would see the PCS being maintained and viable in the future. The model considered the predominant transaction types in Jamaica, and a tariff fee was applied. Now, this model considered the funding for future new processes, as well as change requests, and also software refresh. In terms of governance and ownership, the need to determine the appropriate governance structure and ownership model is essential. In Jamaica, the project was initially conceived as a public-private partnership, but based on the outcome of the public-private partnership RFP, the commercial structure was changed. The Port Authority of Jamaica decided to provide the resources, which would be the human and financial capital, and we had Jamaica Customs Agency come on board as a partner in implementing the PCS. The Port Authority of Jamaica operates the Port Community System Operator Department. So we are a department within the Port Authority of Jamaica. And some things to remember. The implementation, as mentioned before by the previous presenters, is a change management project. While this implementation is heavy on the software and technology, what you will be managing is the change of an industry to utilize the resources provided by this technology. The PCS is not a fix-all. Right? Not all industry processes can be enveloped in the PCS. In your implementation, you need to choose attainable goals and do not seek perfection at the onset. Strategically implement. You need to also have continuous training on already implemented processes as well as new ones to keep everyone abreast at all times of the processes. Continually engage community in communication and project development. You need to have your community feeling that they are getting relevant information and they know exactly what is happening and what is coming and what will affect them in the rollout of the PCS. Have an open avenue for feedback as well as change requests for new and evolving processes. So moving on to some of the benefits that we recognized in having a PCS implementation. Having implemented a PCS should see significantly reduced errors. Now, through a single submission of information, this will be carried through the system, reducing the input points, thus reducing the errors. Improving the visibility and transparency of data in the PCS. Now, with track and trace, the status of cargo is visible in real time and to all the relevant stakeholders. With reduced costs, time saved, increased efficiency, reduced paper, increased speed. All of these efficiency gains would be as a result of the PCS and the new business processes. All of these can be realized once the entities decide to capitalize on them. I would like to highlight some of the pitfalls identified to our implementation of the PCS as the project risks. Now, delays with stakeholder IT interfaces. This was marked as a high risk, as the PCS will require information for varying stakeholder systems, because the PCS interacts with a lot of members of the port community, some of them international, right? And their priorities may not be the same as your local priorities. So this has to be in mind when engaging these stakeholders and having clear, concise implementation processes. Inconsistent communication with stakeholders and losing their support. Communication with stakeholders first needs to be timely, and also the implementation needs to follow up. So once you initiate communication, you need to follow up, keeping the stakeholders abreast of the progress of your project. The port community new business process acceptance. As with any change, you will meet resistance. It is a given. Nobody wants to change. Right? Communicate with stakeholders and show the benefits to be derived from the change that will be implemented. Have them on your side. Public support for legislative change. Just as with the new business processes, any change that is made that will see people paying or any change at all, engagement needs to take place, and they need to understand the benefits that will be derived from the changes. Building and retaining capacity within the PCS operator. Now, the PCS operator is quite a unique department based on the processes that the PCS operator would have to oversee and disseminate information on. Now, the skills required would encompass the entire port community and their processes, right? And so creating capacity for a department such as this is quite, what I would say, quite time consuming, and proper training plans must be in place for the members of the PCS operator group to have them getting up to speed and build capacity in the shortest possible time. Now, coming from these project risks, I hope we have highlighted some information, some good information to you in your implementation journey of what we saw, or our experience in implementing Jamaica PCS, and would have aided you in your future implementation of your PCS. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Nikane, and your colleagues at the Jamaica PCS for your willingness to truly share your experience as you implement it and now have the up and running functioning PCS in Jamaica. And I wanted to also highlight that the Jamaica PCS has been recognized by the OAS Inter-American Committee on Ports as the winner of the Maritime Awards of the Americas in 2021 for their PCS. So it is truly a remarkable, wonderful initiative in the region. And it's just so wonderful to see how our friends and colleagues in Jamaica are willing to share not only what has worked for them in implementing a PCS, but also what hasn't, because it's those lessons learned that we can then learn from and adapt to as we are implementing the PCSs. So thank you so much, Nikane. Your presentation was truly remarkable. So congratulations on that. I am now excited to virtually invite on the floor our panelists, Hans, Ramel, and Nikane. Feel free to turn on your cameras. I am now going to also invite our audience, if you have questions, to please ask away in the chat. I know Jorge is also taking notes and making sure that we don't miss any of your questions. But I would like to kick off with, thanks, Jorge. I would like to kick off with a question for Hans. You've emphasized in your presentation that change management is the part of PCS development that seems to be the most critical, or let's say one of the most critical components, right? And I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate a little bit more on that and what it entails.
Thank you, Mona. Well, it was echoed in Nikane's presentation as well, as you see. Yeah. How to change management, and he was also talking about pillars. And pillars, there was the C management steering committee he mentioned. And what we always do is look at the advisory board when you start to change management, being a steering committee, normally the CEOs of the companies, and the working committee that acts in let's say, on behalf of the CEOs, because CEOs makes, let's say, the statement what to do, the priority, etc., and then it comes to the working committee to make it work. And how to make it work and how to work together with the stakeholders is very important. And that's not rocket science. It's rocket science actually, when you know how to work, but it's very difficult for people to mention where to start, what to do, the do's and don'ts, etc. And there are a lot of methods to use, but especially from my point of view, and I did it during my port-based time and also during the years while I'm working for IPCSA and talking to people, we are looking at two methodologies, basically, being cutters and being bridges. I might be able to find the slide, but I come. Let me try. Yeah, but where is it? That's always the trick, isn't it?
Yes. And to echo a little bit what you said, Hans, while you're looking for your slide. So I think we can also say, and we've seen this, Romel, in the case of Barbados as well. So it's really critical to early on engage the stakeholders, you know, really from the beginning is when you want to really gain that buy-in from the wider port community. That's down the line is also going to make your work and your life a lot easier. Hans, I saw that there you pulled up a slide, but I don't know if that was the right one you were looking for.
I hope I have it now.
Okay.
You can see this slide, I think.
Yeah.
This Cottas is like climbing stairs, and it's climbing stairs. And it's a change management method to, you have seen in my slide, the blocks that say the steps to be taken, the commitment of the people you have to get, build a coalition, build the advisory board, go to have a steering committee, like Nikkei said, with the CE management and also a working committee, and create together with them the vision, and look where you can make the vision work. And empower other people around you and create, as you see, wins. And it's going up the stairs, and it's going round and around, because you build the change and you make the change and you have it implemented at a certain moment. And then you start again for the next step, and so on. So this is more the way to work together with the advisory board. The other one I would like to show you, this is Cottas. So yeah, now it's gone, Cottas. Let me see where I can find. I'm not sharing my screen now, is it?
Nope, not currently.
Not yet. So let's see when I use this. You can see it now.
Yes.
Yeah, right. This is Bridges, and Bridges is well, actually the one that I use most of the time. Of course, you actually need them both, but Bridges is more on the mental point of view. When you look at people, it's always people business. People are passionate, their profession, they have their hobbies, different cultures they have to take care of, and of course about the emotion of people. Emotion of people comes back in all the stages, whether you're profession, passionate or not. Everywhere you find the emotion. So the mental aspect is very important. And what you see in the Bridges model, and not to forget the Cottas one I just displayed, you see endings: shocked, angry, denial, fearful, sad. People are working in a certain environment. They made maybe IT development, they did make software at a certain moment. And now you are coming in and telling them you have a PCS and it will be over. That's a shock for people, because they think, what's going to happen? Why are we changing? Why should we change? So you must communicate and be transparent as much as possible. And then you will find in the timeline, you see from left to right, they come in a period that are more confused, they're frustrated. We have always done it this way, as I told you in my presentation. And now you have to go to another level. And there, the mental point of view, and to talk to them and to be together with them and sit even for hours if necessary, and days and months. It can take a lot of time in the beginning. You come to a certain level of the new beginnings. At a certain moment, they will say, hey, this is the way to go. We should do this, we should do that. And then you have the next step in the time, the new beginnings, the excited moment, the commitment of the people, and the energy of the people getting back. So from being shocked and sad to the energized status is so important. And when you look at the methodology of Bridges, you will find some steps and some highlights in that methodology. Where to start with, how to act, etc., etc. So that's always one of my favorite things. People business, talking to people, working with people, and of course you must have an IT system and a good system with a very good and neutral and trusted system, of course. But the people business,
absolutely,
right?
Excellent. Thank you, Hans. Thank you so much for those insightful remarks. I just want to make sure that I am taking note of the questions in the audience. There are a couple of questions as they relate to the legislative framework for PCS implementation. So we'll get we'll get to that. But first, I would like to ask Rommel a follow-up question. What is your advice, Rommel, for ports who are attempting developing and implementing a PCS for the first time? Build or buy?
Thanks for the question. So there's no fixed formula. It really depends on your timeline. It depends on your funding. It also depends on what you have. So in the context of Barbados, we already have a e-services portal, which provides several of the components that a PCS would offer. So we already have an online payment platform. We already handle electronic manifests. We already do cargo tracking. And we've built these systems that are adherent to certain messaging standards. They leverage certain technologies. So in the context of Barbados, it would make more sense to just build on this and complete your PCS. There are other countries who may be starting from scratch, and it may be better for them to buy and then customize. So it really varies according to your environment.
Excellent. Thank you, Rommel. And I think you mentioned that earlier. With that being said, we can also, look to ports that are similar to ours and their experience, and then also have that a little bit of guidance, even though we always say, when you know one port, one port. So they're all very different. But you highlighted very nice in your presentation previously the importance of you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we can look to our neighbors and partners and colleagues in their efforts. So thank you very much for that, Rommel.
You're welcome.
Nikane, what would you identify as the major risks to the successful implementation of a PCS? You're still muted, Nikane. So
I'm sorry.
There you go. There you go.
Yes. Well, first I'd identify probably stakeholder buying as one of the major risks to the implementation of PCS. Basically, because having the persons or the different entities who would be utilizing or need to be utilizing the PCS and having it as successful implementation would be a risk, because I think Hans made mention of it in his presentation, where you would have and also Rommel, you would have a system being implemented but not have persons to utilize the system, and then where would it be? Right? I mentioned in my presentation also that some of the stakeholders that would need to interact with the PCS, they may not move at the same pace as according to the timelines that you would have or you would like the PCS to be implemented in. So early engagement and having them have an understanding of what it is you're trying to achieve, and having them commit to also delivering from their end would be also critical to the implementation. So I would say stakeholder buying would be the major.
I see a common theme here, but we can't stress it enough. As Rommel said, yes, in fact, the IT component is critical, because without that, there would be no PCS. But the PCS has to be used, and it's being used by people. So which is why we are really we can't stress this enough. I do have some more questions prepared for our panelists, but I see that there are plenty of questions in the chat. So I would actually like to maybe address some of those, and they're all linked to the legislative component. So I see Benoit from Dominica, and I see Grace from St. Lucia, and Pedro from Mexico. They are asking questions on what were some of the legislative changes that facilitated the transition or that facilitated the implementation of a PCS. And I see that Benoit here is asking who championed or what entity championed these changes? Was that the Port Authority, or what entity was that? Nickane, I'm going to pass that on over to you, that question.
Great, thanks. Well, in terms of legislation, if your country, well, PCSs on a whole are relatively new, right? So more than likely the legislations of your country would not have had anything specific to the operations of a PCS, and the PCS needs to be legally able to carry out its mandate, right? So these are the types of changes that would facilitate the PCS operating and functioning in accordance to legislation, right? In terms of the entity that champions the move, I'm assuming you're asking in general for different PCSs across the world, and I think in general your port authority would have to be involved, but I think you have to have a strong support from your private sector, who maybe your shipping association or business entities who would benefit from and see the benefit from having a PCS. I think those yes, three entities would push for the legislative move.
Excellent. Thank you, Nickane. Romel, would you like to maybe comment on that? I wish we had Najla on the phone with us, on the call here with us on the Zoom, because she's the expert there at BPI. But maybe you would like to elaborate a little bit on that. And Pedro is also asking similar question with regards to what are the main legal barriers or legal system barriers for the PCS implementation. So if you want to, or if you want to bring Najla on.
I could call her now.
Let's call her. Okay.
And I fully agree with what Nickane said. I could not have said it much better. There are going to be gaps that are going to exist because PCS is new to many territories. What you want is the legislation in place that gives your system teeth, something that mandates that you use the system and use it in this particular fashion. We had a similar journey when we developed our maritime single window. So we had legislation that was implemented. It was based off the treaty with FAL, and we enacted that in our legislation. So that is now enshrined in our law, and within about, once we have completed the final phase of the MSW, then we will have vessels mandated to report by the maritime single window. Some of them already have started, but it will be a similar process that you will undertake for your PCS. So you don't want that you have a system, and as Nickane said earlier, people are not using it. So you need that legislation to give your system, to give teeth, traction to your system. Right. So I fully agree with Nickane.
Excellent. I love that you both are on the same boat. No pun intended. You have the international experience, right? And the international overview. So I also wanted to pass on that question over to you. If you could share some of your thoughts on the legislative frameworks, or share with us a little bit the experience that you have at IPCSA when it comes to that. Hans, you're muted. I'm unmuting you. There you go. I unmuted you.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Yes, of course. It's always a part of the game, the legislation of systems and how you can work with it, and you're allowed to work with it. And from our global view, you see, and I mentioned in my former part of the presentation by Stockers and Bridges, the culture in some countries differ. And with the culture, you will also find another way of thinking, another way of looking to some aspects. And the good thing of IPCSA, for instance, is that when you come on legal points, we have some countries that want to have a PCS from the Port Authority point of view because they see for the infrastructure, it's critical. And then the customs are reluctant because they say, it's not possible that a PCS sends the data to me. And what we do as IPCSA in those cases, we say, it is possible, but you have to talk and to communicate about that. And then we bring them into contact with countries and ports where it has been done. For instance, Asikuda, which is used in Jamaica, and where the customs are linked to the systems. We found that in other parts of the world, the customs are reluctant. They say it's impossible to use to have Asikuda linked to a PCS. And then we say, okay, we have a meeting. We set up a meeting with the country where the customs are reluctant, with the country where the customs are using the PCS and are even in full swing or have the connection done. And then at a certain moment, try to find a way that customs talk to customs. So you have a kind of culture, another culture, customs culture, to talk to each other about the legal aspects. And then they will find out that it is possible. So that's one of our, let's say, link PCSs or ports to each other to find out ways to make it work in the most profitable way.
Thank you, Hans. I want to be mindful of time, so I'll have one question for each of you, and then we'll wrap up. There was also a question, Nikane. Grace from St. Lucia asked if we could share your contact information, and I believe it was at the end of your presentation, but I just wanted to.
Sure, that's not a problem.
Okay,
No problem.
excellent. Thank you.
No.
Thanks. Romel, you mentioned earlier the cyber component, right? How important is cybersecurity as it relates to the PCS, and what can be done to boost awareness?
So it is of extreme importance. It is so important that it should be built into your design and not, so you don't build the system and then try to secure it. It should be built into your design. And one of the fundamental hurdles that we experience is the notion that cybersecurity is an IT problem. It is, in fact, an entire organizational problem. And when you have a PCS now, it is a problem for the community. So take, for instance, you have an attack on one of your members, but that member is not the intended victim, but that member is just the way into your community. So now you have your entire port community vulnerable to a cyber attack. So this is something that we need to, to send home, to drill home from the start. It is not an IT issue. It is an entire system-wide issue. Every single person, regardless of their role, has to play a part. And we drive this using cybersecurity campaigns. You obviously, you again hire an external set of eyes to conduct your cybersecurity assessments, but it is part of your system design and not an afterthought.
Right. Completely agree.
Yeah, Hans is chiming in. Thank you for that, Romel, and thank you, Hans, as well. We've seen it now in Barbados. You guys are truly a remarkable example. You're very aware, and as you said, it is being built into the system from the get-go and not as an afterthought, because this is really the opportunity to build it in from the get-go. So thanks so much for that, Romel. I'll have another question for Nikane. Nikane, what are some of the considerations in determining a business model? If you could share your thoughts on that.
There are a number of factors, I think. So when implementing, the implementing agency, whether it's government or private, whatever agency is implementing, you have to consider what the financial model would or should look like. What type of venture would you say your implementation would be? It would be a for-profit venture, and I think, as with any other paid service, you would need to determine a price point at which your stakeholders, or what is palatable for your stakeholders, and because they are essentially the persons that it would affect, right? What are you going to charge? What are you going to charge it on? How would you finance the project? Would you consider a public-private partnership? How exactly would it be funded? What would be the expected returns? And I think once you think about some of these, or you consider some of these, then based on the answers to some of these questions, it kind of starts to shape what model you would consider in business model you would consider in developing your PCS.
So again, the early on stakeholder coordination, stakeholder engagement, and consultation, and that leads me a little bit to my thank you, Nikane. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It leads me to my final question as we wrap up the Q&A for Hans. Can you share with us a little bit on how to attract people and stakeholders to the PCS implementation process?
Yeah, the best way is to attract the associations. Associations from the business part of the forwarding agents associations and the shipping agency associations, to sit together with them, because they take over the responsibilities for their members actually, and they are, let's say, the spokesman to them, and to find out who is the best to take place in a committee to work together with the intended PCS operator. And then you find out, sitting them together, they sometimes they will just focus on the pain points, but be careful not to focus on the pain points only, but also on the normal processes. And you just ask them, who do you think are the best people to have in, let's say, an advisory commission at C-level and also on working committee level. And from my perspective, I say, don't give me the most easiest one. Just give me people that are a little bit hesitating, because they must, you have to prove to them especially how things work. And when you come to certain terms with the association about that, and you have your work committee done, you're going to set up, let's, priorities. Is it the seaside? Is it interland? Is it inbound cargo, outbound cargo? Is it vessel notification? Those kind of aspects you have to deal with. And then you start really working with them to set priorities and to make it work, and to sit again and communicate, let's say, from the very beginning to the end on daily basis. Sometimes you have meetings with all these stakeholders for a certain group, to evaluate what has been done, to tell them where the working committees are working on, etc., etc. And you will find out that those people that in the advisory board that you have and where you're working with, and at a certain moment they become excited or get the, let's say, the click, they will be your ambassador. They will tell that to their competitors, but also to their friends, use the PCS in the future because this and this and this are the advantages. I'm not going to tell that. They have to do it themselves, and they are the ambassadors, and that's the best way to go.
Awesome. Thank you, Hans. Yes, it's really about creating that ownership, even if it's one entity that is administrating the PCS and operating the PCS, it is truly the community. Yep. It is a port community system. It is truly that community that should have ownership over this tool. So I really appreciate that. And gentlemen, it has been an absolute honor to moderate this session with you and to be able to learn from your experience. And I see there were many more questions in the chat, so you can see that there's really a strong interest. And like Hans said earlier in his remarks, the COVID pandemic has really accelerated the digitalization processes in our industry, especially in our region. We know Europe has been implementing PCSs for many decades, but in our region, this is truly, the future is here. And these processes are not going anywhere, and we're just honored to be able to facilitate in any way that we can. And it's been such a pleasure working with the colleagues at BPI, and such a pleasure to continue to learn from the Jamaica experience, and we're just so honored and grateful. So thank you so much. It was so much fun spending this morning with you. I am now excited to pass it on over to Jorge for a brief summary and some final thoughts, and then we'll hand it on over to Hans for the closing. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you all. Indeed, great presentations. I see that Benoit Bardouil from Dominica is already saying in the chat, great presentation. Thank you, my friend, for the comment. I am going to be very brief. I don't want to go and summarize everybody's presentation, even though I did take notes for that. But given the time, I'm just going to go over some take-homes that I want to pass on to the audience, and then I will tell you a couple of anecdotes. Well, first of all, I think the three speakers, we can distill the fact that a lot of the work for the PCS is actually conducted before you even start the project. A lot of analysis must be done before. Trust is key, as Hans mentioned. Trust is key in order to get all the community, all the stakeholders involved. Those have to then agree on a business model. They have to agree to all be on the same page. And this is even before $1 spent on anything. So that is an important take home to do. There's a lot of the work, a lot of the planning, a lot of the work goes before the actual thing. Another issue that was recurring here is the legislation, is the importance of having proper and adequate legislation that can support not only digital signatures, but digital processes. And then you need to get into the data protection kind of part. Is what are you going to do with my data? What am I, how is that data going to be protected? There has to be legislation very clear on this. In addition to that, the advantages of no paper, but there are particular apps that can be put in mobile devices. There are PCSs that only work from sort of the central computer. And another take home, the point of cybersecurity, of the utmost importance. And as it was said, this is not something you can do later and just, goof. We forgot the cyber, patch it up. No, this needs to be endemic and intrinsic to the PCS itself from the very beginning. And as it was said, it is not an ITI project. Neither the cybersecurity nor the PCS is an IT project. They're organization-wide projects, and they are organic in the sense that they need to grow out of the different organizations that bring up different concerns. It was also said, if you do one port, you do one port, and not PCS is going to be the same. You need to use different technologies, different degrees of things for certain solutions. We all spoke about, and this is often, about the re-engineering of processes to make the whole management more time saving, cost saving, paperless, which means environment, and at the same time secure. So the digitalization is not scanning your forms and putting them on the internet so that they can be filled out there. That doesn't solve anything. That's not what we are talking about. We're talking about looking at a particular project and redesigning the project, the process itself, so that it can be incorporated into the tool. The technology here is a tool, it's a means to an end. It is not the end in itself, the PCS. So I'll take you a quick, many years ago, a very important terminal and port we're working on a very early a version of a maritime single window, no papers, and they went ahead and had the expense and hired the consultant and did the digital work and everything, only to find out that there was no law supporting digital legislation. Digital signature. So they did the work, and then it was the Congress itself who had to kind of catch up to that private initiative where they were hit. And then the issue of cybersecurity. It is not an IT project. It is an organizational-wide concern. And the little memory sticks that one gets to have. These are major breaches of protocol. If I go somewhere and I put my presentation on a memory stick, which I don't use them anymore, I'll usually just let them keep the memory stick, because it's one of the easiest ways to get infected, to get malware, to get penetrated. And like Romel said, you might not be the target, but you will be the way in to your port for these. So these are a few of the take-homes. I must end by thanking our presenters, Nikane, Romel, and Hans, obviously. And then Hans, I also thank for being our partner in this endeavor. Let me tell you that we will be organizing another English-based seminar such as this one in a month's time. This will have to do with ports and customs, if I'm not mistaken, Hans. And with that, my friend, I'll give you the word so that you can close this very informative and productive session. I'd also like to thank all the port authorities, the terminals, the port personnel that was present and engaged and asking questions. Thank you very much. This is why we do these things. And I will finish with something extremely important that Nikane mentioned, which is training and capacity building. You need to train your human capital. This is the single most important element in your whole thing, is the human capital that will be using this technology. You need to keep that trained. You need to keep that updated to build capacities, build additional capacities. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been our pleasure. Mona, thank you very much for moderating the session. Nikane, Romel, and Hans, thank you again. And my friend, you have the floor for closing words, Hans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge, for the nice words and the recapitulation of today's seminar. I thought you hit it all the points that has been going around from the first moment to the last moment, and that's quite a trick, isn't it, in 2 hours time. And of course, thank you, Mona, for moderating. Thank you, Monica, for the technical support in the background, and both my friends Rommel and Nikane. And Nikane say goodbye. Say hello to Dwayne as well, because we have had so many chats in the meantime. It was a pleasure for the audience. It was a pleasure to give you some highlights on development of PCSs. If you want to know more about development of PCSs, when you look at the ipcsa.international website, you will find a booklet how to develop a PCS, and you can find some points that might be of interest for you in your development. And you will remark that there are about, I thought, 14 different bullets mentioned. Only on number 12, and only is not the right word, but number 12, you find the IT development. So there are 11 steps before you start the IT development to make it work. So I was very happy to be together with you. Hope to see you soon, indeed, with Port and Customs. That's the next webinar we have together. And as I said in the beginning, I hope to see each other in person as soon as possible. And one thing more to Rommel and Mona, you forgot about your Rotterdam adventure. We close the session now and have a chat about that. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good luck.
Thank you all.
And thank you for coming here. See you next time.
Okay.
Thank you all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Two our speakers will be teleported to a separate room for
No
a couple
problem.
minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.